Video games have played a huge part of my life, fueling my creative mind into what it is now. I wasn't much of a social kid. I had a hard time making friends, so whenever I got home, I would turn on my PlayStation 2 or the Wii and just go at it, making more memories with Crash Bandicoot and Sonic the Hedgehog than my own fellow students. And I've been looking into my past lately, feeling nostalgic and, I'll admit, a little lost. I think maybe if I look back at what inspired me, then perhaps I can have a better understanding of who I am and what I want to do with my life. So today, I'll be starting a new series of top lists going over the games of my childhood. I say series because while there is a lot I want to talk about, I know I want to return to this topic, so I'm making sure I leave my options open when I do. For this video, I will be focusing on games that came before the 2010s, in other words, during the 2000s. But the game doesn't have to be released during that time period, I just have to have the most experience with it then. So with that being said, welcome to Cackling Pumpkins, and here are 10 games that define my childhood. Shrek Super Party. It was Christmas of 2003 and me and my sister just got one of the best gifts we could ever ask for, a PlayStation 2! You see, me and my sister were already familiar with PlayStation due to my mom's friend lending us theirs. So getting the next system was a dream come true. My mom already got us 2 games for the system as well, the first being Shrek Super Party. We discovered the game thanks to a next door neighbor who already had a copy before us, but now we had our own. So what is Shrek Super Party? Well, during the early 2000s there was a sudden rise of party games. This was most likely due to the popularity of Mario Party, inspiring other studios to make their own variations of Nintendo's party game. SpongeBob SquarePants Lights Camera Pants, Fusion Frenzy, Whack, Pac-Man Fever, Sonic Shuffle, Nickelodeon Party Blast, and the topic of this section, Shrek Super Party. Lord Farquaad starts a competition to see who can be the first to gather the precious drops needed to grant their wish. Shrek, Donkey, Fiona, Lord Farquaad, Thelonious, and Ms. Your Hood travel to different realms, swapping bugs and collecting the precious drops needed to pour down the well and grant their wish. Instead of multiple maps, you only have one, but there are 5 realms you can go down. Each are based on a location from the first Shrek film. The Keep, the Windmill, the Swamp, the Castle, and the Farm. Instead of a dice block, you have to drop the ball. A ball will rotate over the tray with 9 options. You press a button and the ball drops, but the ball has physics to it, so it could potentially go further than what you needed to or not close enough. I will admit I kinda like this idea. With the rotating and the physics, it doesn't give you complete control over where you can go, but it isn't quite as random as the dice block. You can at least influence your direction. Once the ball drops, you go to the right spot or one of 10 things could happen. You can enter an epic battle. Instead of waiting until after everyone takes a turn, a minigame is activated by landing on the right spot. Each realm has their own collection of minigames, so the choice of map also influences the games you could play. If you want my opinion, both the Keep and the Castle have the best minigames. The minigames themselves are alright, but most are completely broken. But I could see some people getting enjoyment out of how broken these games really are. But maybe it's better you play with friends, as the AI is either outright awful at minigames or impossibly perfect. It's too much of a gamble, honestly. Some minigames are too similar to each other, but I guess that's expected. After a game ends, you get the chance to trade bugs. Bugs are the source of the precious drops. All you have to do is have at least 2 bugs of the same color to get the points. There are 5 bugs, each with their own value from 1 to 5. With the combinations you can make, sometimes having the right bugs is better than having the more valuable bugs. The amount of bugs you can trade is based on your placement in the match. First you can trade 3, second 2, third 1, and last place can't trade at all. The other spots include a daring duel. The player who lands on this spot challenges another player to a game. Despite this, all of the players can still play the game, but only the points of the 2 players in the daring duel count. Same goes for trading bugs. You can also land on spots that either give or take precious points. Either it'll give you a set amount, or you can steal drops from another player, or alternatively, give them to someone else. Pixie Dust, an item you can use to transport yourself to another realm. Shortcut, you land on the spot, but a short cinematic pushes you forward. Magic Portal sends the player to another realm adjacent to the map. Boots that send a player to the bog. There you must travel back to the wishing well while avoiding minus drops and boots that will send you back to the start of the map. Match Bugs gives you the opportunity to trade bugs without the minigame. And lastly, the Magic Mirror, who is also the narrator of this game. He's pretty much a jack of all trades, as you can do anything the other spots can except give you a shortcut. At the end of the map, you'll get some precious drops and get sent back to the well to repeat until one of the players has enough precious drops needed to win the game. Playing this game again to get footage, it was meh. I was expecting to realize that many of the games I played as a kid weren't as good as I remembered, but my feelings about this game were the same. It's alright, there are some things that I like, such as the keeps mini-games and the dropped ball mechanic. Some mini-games are boring, and the only new thing I learned is how broken the game actually is, and how the AI can sometimes fluctuate between difficulties. Fairly OddParents, breaking the rules. The second game my mom got us that Christmas was Fairly OddParents Breaking the Rules. Yeah, I don't know what it is, but the early 2000s had this sudden rise of licensed games. If it existed during this time period, then it most likely had a video game, and most of the time it wasn't that good. Fairly OddParents Breaking the Rules was one of the god knows how many Nickelodeon games made during this era. Originally, I had it for PlayStation 2, but the version you are seeing is from the GameCube, as it is the only version the closest retro video game store I could find had. I highly regret selling my old games. I really want to buy my old collection back. But back to the game. Timmy is frustrated with the limitations the rules set on him, so he wishes they were gone, sapping the power out of them. Yes, I know that would be an obvious rule to make sure no one could wish the rules away, probably the first, but gosh, we need a plot device. Now Timmy's wishes are limited by Fairy Court, and he has to now find each page of the rules, but there's a catch. While the rules may no longer exist, the book itself still does, and it still has magic power in it. Whoever touches the rule book gets its powers, and that person is Vicky. Now whenever she wishes something, it comes true, which becomes the basis of each level. Similar to Mario 64, you start at a hub, which is Timmy's house. Each level is accessed by an object in the house. Each level is vaguely based on an episode, but it's not a one-for-one recreation. It's more of a basis to make a new story out of it. Like that time, Timmy, Chester, and AJ were sucked into a video game world, and an entire Crimson Chin comic book world. But as Timmy's wishes are limited, he can't simply undo Vicky's meddling. He has to collect 5 running stars, but this will only get a minor wish that's treated as more of a power-up. To get a page, you must complete that said level. There are also 4 Crimson Chin cards in each level. Collect them all and you'll be rewarded with a clip from the show. I must say that while this game doesn't look good with some stiff animations and flat image faces, I do appreciate the fact that they tried to replicate the show's art style with the thick outlines and the setting design. It's mainly the characters that don't look good, but the set design does. Though the audio quality is low even for the generation this game was made in, the voices almost sound muffled. But there is one thing I discovered as a kid for the cutscenes. Normally in games of this era, you can either skip cutscenes by pressing a button or you can't at all. In this game, you can't skip cutscenes, but you can skip lines of dialogue. Similar to a text box RPG, but with regular cutscenes. Here, let me show you.
I need to pursue him! Hey! Are you sure about this? I get the fish quick left! Chin up! This coaster's so cool! I can move left and right in the air!
It's kind of hilarious, actually. A flaw, sure, but I like it when games let you interrupt characters mid-sentence. There is also some performance issues here and there. The game is meh. I can see some people having fun with it. It's one of those alright licensed games, but still nothing to write home about. On to the next game. Sonic Heroes. I love Sonic the Hedgehog, but where did my love for the series come from? Well, when I was in preschool, my mom dropped me off at this lady's house. I can't remember who she was for the life of me, but I know she had kids of her own. I remember we watched Monsters Inc. on VHS and played this computer bowling minigame on their computer. I looked to my left and saw one of the kids was playing another game. I didn't see anything like it before. This blue spiky creature being followed by a two-tailed fox in a blue and yellow factory. Of course, this was Sonic the Hedgehog 2 on the Sega Genesis, but I didn't know then. Later, when I moved into my house in Dundalk, Maryland, I discovered a new TV series based on this character called Sonic X. I remember loving the show back then, but my feelings towards it have changed. It's not bad, but it could have been a lot better had they focused on Sonic and his friends and not Chris Thorndike. But one day we went to Walmart to pick up a new game. I didn't really do research on video games and mainly just judged the games based on their cover or if they featured a character I recognized. So my childhood was filled with licensed games, minus a few exceptions. But it's thanks to the exposure that I got from Sonic X that got me to buy Sonic Heroes, my first Sonic game, and ironically enough, Sonic's first game on the PlayStation 2. The back of the cover even says, Sonic's PlayStation 2 Computer Home Entertainment System Debut! And yes, this is the same copy I got years ago. It's one of the few games that I didn't sell or got destroyed during a house fire in 2010. So because of this, the game is aged a little bit and it's a bit busted up. I'm assuming the disc is scratched up, as while there are subtitles that still come up, the character dialogue does not, and if it does, it's heavily delayed. You play as 3 characters, one that represents speed, flight, and strength. And 4 teams you can choose from, all with their own story, but they all go down the same levels and fight the same bosses. So what's different? For Team Sonic, you play as Sonic, Tails, and Knuckles. Their story is that they're trying to stop Dr. Eggman in his latest scheme. They're treated as the normal difficulty. Team Dark features Shadow, Rouge, and Omega, who is the only new character made for this game. And they want revenge on Eggman, as Shadow has no memories, and Omega was made by Eggman, but was left to rot, and Rouge just wants to help them. They are treated as the hard difficulty. Team Rose features Amy Rose, Cream with her cow Cheese, and Big the Cat. Amy is trying to find Sonic, who is being blamed for the kidnapping of Cream's second chow, Chocola, and Big's pet Froggy. Their team is for beginners and is the only story where you have to do the tutorial level before beginning. Lastly, there's Team Chaotic, featuring Vector, Espio, and Charmy. They were brought back from the classic era for this game. They're a detective agency, being hired by a mysterious voice coming out of a walkie-talkie. Their levels are the most different, as they're more objective-based rather than just completing the level. Stuff like collecting hermit crabs or just destroying badniks. Each team also has a team attack that can activate when the meter is filled. You can level up each character 3 times per level, which will upgrade their abilities. But if you die, you lose them all. I was surprised when playing this game again. I was expecting most if not all of them to age poorly, but I actually had a lot of fun with Sonic Heroes. I also noticed that I played a lot better than how I originally did by taking more risks, which also led to my demise. But I also figured out how broken this game can be. How broken? Well, broken in both a good and a bad way. In a good way to compare to Mario 64, where if you're good enough you could skip entire sections of certain levels, but certain things can screw you over for no reason. By the way, yes, I'm still a Sonic fan. I don't care what anyone says. I love the Blue Blur in his series, and I cannot wait for the next adventure. Nicktoons Unite. Now for a game I didn't enjoy going back to, but still like the idea of. Nicktoons Unite, a crossover featuring SpongeBob SquarePants, Fairly OddParents, Jimmy Neutron, and Danny Phantom. In this game, each of their world's respective villains have teamed up for a group called the Syndicate. Formed by Professor Calamitous after copying Jimmy's recent invention used to open doors between worlds, he gathers Plankton, Vlad Plasmius, and Crocker to come together and take over their worlds. Likewise, Jimmy gathers SpongeBob, Danny, and Timmy to stop them. All 4 characters are on the screen at the same time, each with their own abilities. You can switch between all 4 as the ones you aren't playing as are controlled by AI. You have to complete each level and defeat different members of the Syndicate. Each character can also gain new abilities through the game with these pods. Danny can learn to possess enemies, Jimmy can use his shrink ray, Timmy can gain ice powers, and SpongeBob can absorb and spit out water. But that's not all of the abilities they can use, as there are more abilities to unlock. And level up thanks to the help of Goddard. Using the points you collect, you can upgrade each of their abilities whenever you encounter him. While Fairly OddParents breaking the rules is alright, Nicktoons Unite is a bore to get through. It becomes extremely repetitive, walking and fighting enemies and repeat. They don't really do much to change the gameplay either. The game also suffers from worse presentation. Certain characters look off, as these humans possessed by ghosts are for some reason huge. And while some cutscenes are fully voiced and animated, others have text but are still voiced, and some just have text and no voices. It's incredibly inconsistent, and you could tell they didn't want to hire certain voice actors. For example, Sam and Tucker here in Amity Park, while they speak through text, have no voice acting. And when you first encounter Walker, he too isn't voiced in a silent scene, but when you encounter him for his boss fight, then he speaks? I have no idea what happened here. Anyways, Nicktoons Unite. It's boring, but I like the idea. Mirror's Edge. I love parkour games. Any game where you can have nice movement and just speed through a level is fine by me. This is why I love games like Sonic, Freedom Planet, and Super Meat Boy, but those games are more about speed rather than just parkour. If you want a primarily parkour experience, then there's EA Dice's Mirror's Edge, released in 2008. God, do I love this game even though I suck at it! You play as Faith, who is a runner who helps deliver goods behind their corrupt government's back. This world may seem like a utopia to some, but it is heavily monitored by a totalitarian military regime. There is little to no crime, but that's only because they're watching people constantly. On a mission, Faith discovers that someone killed Robert Pope, who was running for mayor. Now she has to find out who killed Pope before her sister, Kate, a police officer, gets framed for his death. I love the movement in this game. Just running around, jumping over obstacles, and sliding under pipes feels so good even to this day. There are moments where the game does force you to slow down by crawling in vents or waiting in an elevator. Other times the game will put you in a time crunch as the authorities are chasing after you. If you're playing this game for the first time, then I recommend playing on either easy or normal. In these difficulties, certain objects you can interact with are painted red. Red is the main color for runners, and here the color guides you through the level, but the red colors are removed in harder difficulties. My main problem with the game is that certain parts are way too dark to see what you're doing, especially this area here, but most of the time the areas are well lit and the red markers don't usually get affected by shading. I've gotta say, I love this game. It's easily one of my favorites, but for those who don't know, there was a reboot. Mirror's Edge Catalyst, which released 8 years later in 2016. I never played this game, but I wouldn't mind trying it. As soon as I get the money, 'cause I'm a poor boy. Pokemon Ruby. Okay, let me just get this out of the way, because I know there are people who are going to be mad at me for saying this, so I'll make it brief and say what I have to as respectfully as possible. I do not like the modern age of Pokemon. No, I am not a Gen 1er or a National Dexer. I am merely someone who is dissatisfied with the current line of products the Pokemon brand is giving out. I personally feel as if that the newer Pokemon games are coming out with less content and polish, and aren't willing to experiment like older titles. I dislike the reliance of Kanto nostalgia, to the point where they released a shot-for-shot remake of the original Pokemon movie. I don't like how Pokemon Sword and Shield removes so much content. And no, I'm not just referring to the Pokemon, and how it is still released at a higher price than older titles. And I also feel as if that because of childhood nostalgia, how popular Pokemon is, and how it's the #1 media franchise in the world, that it won't change or get better, and I feel no need to support a franchise that's not willing to or has no need to try anymore. I would personally much rather support independent businesses and franchises. No, I don't think this makes me entitled or ungrateful, because I don't want to spend the extra money that, truth be told, I don't have on a product I don't feel as if I will enjoy. No, I am not attacking those at Game Freak. I am only an unsatisfied consumer giving out his wholehearted criticism. Also, because of this, I will be avoiding making Pokemon-related content on this channel, and I will only be talking about Pokemon with only a few minor exceptions, in cases like Smash Brothers content, or like this video. But, if you want me to not be as nice, I'll just say this. Mickey Mouse is no longer the only corporate mouse we have to look out for. That's all I'll say. Now that we've got that out of the way, I hope you're not too mad at me even if you disagree with me on the subject. This is also why I don't want to talk about Pokemon too much on this channel, as I feel as if it's become a bit of an iffy topic. And let's move on to a point in time when Pokemon wasn't the #1 media franchise in the world, and even Game Freak was concerned that Pokemon was just a trend that was about to end soon. The third generation, the one I mainly grew up with, the Hoenn region. More specifically Pokemon Ruby, as that's the version I have. Let me ask you something. You ever go outside when it's a certain temperature or time of the year, and it just instantly brings back so many memories? Well, as it's starting to get warm up here in Pennsylvania with spring-like temperatures, the leaves and flowers are already starting to come out, I can safely say that it all reminds me of playing Pokemon Ruby on my Game Boy Advance SP. This thing has survived a lot in my life. I already mentioned that many years ago I had a house fire. A candle got too close to a Halloween decoration in 2010 and my family's house went ablaze. My consoles and most of my games were destroyed, and I'm still trying to replace everything. We went into the house after the fire was out to see what could be saved, and lo and behold, my Game Boy Advance and DS were the closest thing to the fire and completely survived. Don't ask me how. There were some sound issues in the GBA for a short period of time, but that seemingly fixed itself, and since my GBA and DS game were safely contained in a small plastic container, they too were completely fine. This thing is a soldier, and I'll tell you what, Nintendo really knew how to make reliable hardware. Until Joy-Con started drifting and they tried to dismiss a lawsuit about it and failed. But anyway, one of my favorite games on the system is Pokemon Ruby. I don't need to explain Pokemon as most of you already know how it works. You're a new Pokemon trainer who gets the choice of one of 3 starters. A fire type, in this game Torchic, a grass type, here Trico, and a water type, here one of the biggest early 2000s memes.
Those are like mudchips.
You go train your starter, catch a few other Pokemon to defeat 8 gym leaders, one of which being your dad, and face off against an evil team determined on changing the world. In this game, it's Team Magma who wants to expand the landmass of the world, but this generation is a little different as the team you would face off is different depending on the version that you got, something the series hasn't done since. In Pokemon Sapphire, it's Team Aqua, whose goal is to expand the world's oceans. They will do this by awakening the respective legendaries. In Ruby, it's Groudon. In Sapphire, it's Kyogre. And in Emerald, there is a 3rd legendary called Rayquaza. This game also introduces a lot into the series. Double battles, contest, multi-battles, abilities and natures, Pokeblocks, weather conditions, and secret bases. If there's one thing I don't like about the game, it's the rival. In previous games, your rival had an original character, while this one is just your opposite gender. The rivals beforehand were also nasty and awful at every chance they had. They were arrogant, which meant you really wanted to beat them to prove that you were the better adversary. Not only this, but it's also to teach them a lesson. I don't want my rival to be nice. I feel no need to beat them or see them as my rival. Sure, there's friendly rivalries, but most new rivals don't feel like that they should be rivals, and the only reason they are is because that's their set role. I wish we had more mean rivals and enemies in media again, but that's my only problem with this game, as it is my favorite in the entire series. With that being said, I hope Pokemon can improve so I can enjoy newer games. But hey, the older games still exist, and there's nothing stopping me from going back to them whenever I want. Speaking of going back, let's go even further back to October 31st, 1998. Crash Bandicoot Warped. Unlike what most people would assume, Nintendo was not a big part of my childhood. Well, at least not as much as others. Yes, I did have a Game Boy, and I still have my Game Boy Advance SP, but most of my time was being put into PlayStation. It's funny, back when PlayStation All-Stars was released, I heard so many people say that a crossover with Sony characters wouldn't work because they weren't quote-unquote recognizable. Well, here's me, a kid whose only exposure to Nintendo back then was Pokemon, Donkey Kong, and a handful of Mario. I didn't know who Link, Samus, Fox McCloud, or Kirby were until later in my life, as the characters I grew up with were Spike, Spyro, Sora, Pac-Man, Frogger, Sonic, and of course, Crash Bandicoot. Gee, it's almost as if recognizability has more to do with what you grew up with rather than what's older or sold more. But believe it or not, my first Crash game wasn't the first title, nor was it the second game, Cortex Strikes Back, but instead it was the third and final platforming game by Naughty Dog, Crash Bandicoot Warped! After Dr. Neo Cortex's defeat in the second game, his giant space shuttle crashes into a forbidden temple. This temple was the prison to Uka Uka, a dark spirit and brother to Aku Aku. It's revealed that both of Cortex's attempts to take over the world were instructed by Uka Uka, who's furious at Cortex for his failures. But as his failure led to Uka Uka's freedom, he's willing to give him another chance, along with the help of an old friend named Entropy and a time station they intend to use to collect the crystals throughout time to finally take over the world. Aku Aku realizes this and gets both Crash and his sister Coco to travel to these same time periods and collect the crystals before they do. When it comes to platforming, this game nails it. You have all of your abilities from Crash 2. You can run, jump, belly flop, slide, and if you jump while during a slide, you can do a slide jump, and how can anyone forget what Crash is most famous for, his spin. Your objective is to beat the level by going from point A to point B, but it won't count unless you collect a crystal. Don't worry, these crystals are usually put in your path so they're not hard to find at all. In fact, I'd say it'd be hard to miss them. There are also crates throughout the level holding Wumpa Fruits, which if you collect 100, you get an extra life. Some crates hold lives, some have Aku Aku who gives you an extra hit, and if you collect him 3 times without losing him once, you'll get temporary invincibility. There are also TNT crates that if you jump on them, they'll explode within 3 seconds, and nitro crates that will explode on impact. If you want to fully complete this game, then you'll have to break every crate in each level to get a silver gem. And if you beat a level, you can return to that same level, and if you touch this clock, then time will start ticking. There are also crates that can slow down time, so be sure to hit them. I'd say don't bother with these time trials until you've beaten the game once. Speaking of which, after 5 levels, you'll face a boss. Most of these bosses are ridiculously easy, but they don't take too much time, so I don't mind. After you beat a boss, you gain a new ability. After you beat the final boss, you get Speed Shoes or the Crash Dash. This ability will make it so much easier to beat the time trials and collect the relics. There are also new vehicle-based levels featuring both Crash and his sister Coco. Some are alright, like the Purga levels. The motorcycle is stiff but manageable. The jet ski controls are the worst, while the airplane is probably the most boring. I will also say that unlike Crash 2, this game is a lot easier. It's probably the easiest out of the original Crash titles. In fact, while getting this footage, I made it all the way up to Dingo Dial within an hour and almost had 40 lives, and nearly all of the gems. I'd say if you want this level of platforming, but more of a challenge, I'd recommend Crash 2. Or you could just get the Insane Trilogy on literally every platform available. That's an option too. Ed, Edd and Eddy, The Misadventures. As a kid, my favorite channel to watch was Cartoon Network. Back then we had cable, so I had the option to watch any kids network from that time period. While I did enjoy watching Nickelodeon and WB Kids when I got home from school, and Disney Channel was alright, my favorite will always be Cartoon Network. But it wasn't that hard to find any of them if I got bored of one or the other, as these channels were basically right next to each other. Disney Channel was channel 43, Nickelodeon was channel 44, and Cartoon Network was channel 45. Also, TV Land was 76, Animal Planet was 47, ABC Family was 42, Spike TV was 41, TNT was 40, VH1 was 63, MTV was 64, Comedy Central was 53, and don't ask me how I remember any of this because I don't know. Anyway, why was Cartoon Network my favorite out of all my options? Simple. I loved and still adore cartoons. As Disney and Nick were keen on making live-action sitcoms alongside their animated programming, Cartoon Network was animation 24/7. Well, most of the time, but we don't talk about seeing real. It also had Adult Swim, the best action shows, no preschool educational block minus that one time, Looney Tunes, Tom and Jerry, and Toonami. Feel free to tell me some of yours, but some of my favorite shows back then were Teen Titans, Billy and Mandy, Ben 10, Samurai Jack, Powerpuff Girls, Dexter, Camp Lazlo, Regular Show, and the topic of this section, Ed, Edd and Eddy. A show about 3 boys all with the same name trying to make a quick buck by scamming their neighborhood kids. It's often described as the animated Three Stooges due to the slapstick comedy in the characters' personalities. Ed was the dumb but lovable one, Ed or Double D was the cowardly smart one, and Eddy was the selfish schemer and leader of the group. Back when cartoon characters were able to be mean without being called problematic. Those were the days. As the show came in 1999, most of its episodes came during the 2000s. Thus, much like SpongeBob, I count this as more of a 2000 show rather than a 90s show because of that. You're not going to call a kid who was born in 1998 a 90s kid, are you? But with this show being the most prominent during the 2000s, it too was given a licensed game. I don't know why everything that existed during the 2000s had a video game. It didn't matter what you were. If you existed, you had a game about you. Ben 10, SpongeBob, Jimmy Neutron, Powerpuff Girls, That's So Raven, Narnia, The Incredibles, Drake and Josh, Hannah Montana, Harry Potter, and even if you weren't relevant at that point, you still most likely had a game based on you. Oh wait, there was a Godfather video game?! Anyway, and there was Ed and Eddy, The Misadventures. You play as all 3 Eds as they perform different objectives in episode-style levels, but unlike Fairly OddParents breaking the rules, there isn't a general plot for the game, and while some levels are, most aren't based on episodes from the show. You can switch between the Eds by pressing a button, as each has their own abilities required to beat each level. Ed can pick up and throw objects and charge into barriers with the help of Eddy and Double D. Double D can be tossed to higher ground, use a slingshot and fix broken technology, and Eddy can throw stink bombs and make the Tower of Ed. Trust me, you're mainly going to use Ed and Double D here. Of all games I played to get footage for, this one had to be the one I enjoyed the least. But that's to be expected, licensed games were not known for their quality. But at least some have redeeming aspects, like how Nicktoons Unite is a big crossover and Shreks Super Party is at least entertaining in a chaotic sense. But the Misadventures isn't at all. The game is unpolished. Certain things blend into the scene too easily. Some things that are meant to be highlighted as you know you can interact with them only seem to be highlighted sometimes. Some things are too precise and too unclear at times, and this game is ugly. I will say that I appreciate the fact that they tried to replicate the shaky lines from the show, but that doesn't change the fact that the characters look horrendous. I'm a firm believer that any character can work in 2D and 3D if you actually put in the right effort and attention to detail, but it doesn't seem like they could have done much back then. Maybe now, as 3D animation, including game animation, can do so much more. But as it is, The Misadventures is one of the few times I didn't enjoy going back to an old game. Am I shocked? Not really. Disappointed? Yeah. Big Mother Truckers. Alright kids, it's story time. Let me tell you about the time I made one of the biggest mistakes of my life, all to try to keep a friend. Back then, my sister used to play video games with me, and she had some of her own favorite games too, one of which was Big Mother Truckers, a video game all about trucking and taking loads to different destinations. She used to play the hell out of this game, but then I made one huge mistake. You see, I had this neighborhood friend that I was sleeping over with one night. I decided to bring some of my games that we could play, one of which was Big Mother Truckers. While playing, he too seemed to enjoy it and asked if he could keep it. So desperate to keep one of my few neighborhood friends, I said yes. Months later, my sister was looking all over the place for the game, and I had to break the news to her. She was furious with me, and we both went down to get the game back, but he claimed he sold it. Granted, this could have been a lie so he can keep it to himself, but there was nothing we could do. I felt horrible about it, and for years the regret tormented me. I'm not good with handling my past mistakes. Even if it's something no one else cares about anymore, something like this will eat away at me. Well, no more! Cause I fucking got a copy and now my conscience is cleared! Granted, it's for the Xbox, which we didn't have back then as we had a PS2, but still I'm fucking happy! I was able to find this, and fuck you, regret! You can't hold me down forever! Well, anyway, what's the game about? 4 truckers that are all siblings work under their mom's trucking company, but she's going to retire soon and is willing to hand the company down to one of her 4 kids. But there's a catch. If you want her business, you're going to have to earn it. You have 60 days to deliver loads and get all the money you can. Whoever gets the most money by the end of these 60 days wins. You can play as any of the 4 siblings from Cletus, Bobby Sue, Earl, and Ruckus. You go down to deliver a load and buy a new one. But there's one problem. You're not told where the load goes, so you have to find out yourself. You do this by going into bars and asking questions. The bartender will typically give you hints as to where the best locations to deliver are. You can also be challenged to a race by another truck driver. Winner gets the money wagered. Sometimes you'll even be attacked by a motorcycle gang, just like real life. And I wish I was joking. My mom is actually a truck driver, and because of this, she's seen the entire USA from the best and worst parts of it. She's told me stories about how rioters in LA attacked her, one guy stalked her and tampered with her truck, more riots, people on the highway who would get in front of her and intentionally slow down, being on the day of the 9/11 attacks and desperately trying to get home to protect me and my sister, etc, etc, etc. Truckers gotta deal with a lot of shit. If you don't like truckers or what they do, I'll tell you the same thing my mom tells other people.
If you don't want to fucking deal with truckers, then stop buying shit. If it wasn't for truckers, you wouldn't be able to get your fucking toilet paper or Walmart to wipe your ass with. Now see you later, cupcake.
Granted, that's not what my mom sounds like. I'm just a dickhead. And that being said, being a truck driver ain't easy, and neither is this game. It's easy to go out of control with your 18-wheeler, and unlike most games where there's either a GPS or an arrow guiding you, you have street signs that come up on your screen. Though I will admit some of these signs come a little too late to react. And needless to say, this isn't my type of game, but I could see some people getting some mileage out of it. Pun completely not intended. Super Smash Bros. Brawl. Now it's time for quite possibly the most important video game on this list, because if it wasn't for this game, I would have never gotten into video games to begin with. Super Smash Bros. Brawl. When the Wii came out, I was obsessed with it. Me and my sister basically begged my mom for the console, and one day I came home from school and they were getting it hooked up into the TV. I was excited. I made a Mii and played some Wii Sports and eventually got some games for the system. The games I got were primarily rentals from either Blockbuster or Movie Gallery. One day I went to Blockbuster and I saw a poster for a certain game. The poster was of its cover and it had Mario, Pikachu, and the Pokemon trainer on the cover. That was enough for me to try it. I went home and instantly started playing the adventure mode, Subspace Emissary. I played throughout the entire mode and played some matches against CPUs, and I was in love. Keep in mind, this is the first time I discovered most of Nintendo's characters. I only knew Mario characters, Pokemon, and Sonic, so I didn't know who everyone else was. I didn't know who Link was, who Olimar was, who Lucas was. I thought Marth was a girl, I thought Samus and Zero Suit Samus were different people, and I thought Mr. Game & Watch was a guy who summoned objects from his watch. Keep in mind, this is only because I didn't grow up with any of these characters, but I would eventually learn who they are and their legacies because of this game. I wanted to learn more about who these guys were and where they were from. Who's Pit? Who's Snake?
Who's Ganondorf?
It's because of this game I was able to learn all about these characters and become the person I am now. But I must bring up some things about this game because I know some people are expecting it. Yes, I realize this is the most casual game in the series, and I personally prefer more competitive aspects. And yes, I hate tripping too. But I don't think this game is bad by all means. It's going to take a lot more than slower gameplay and one cheap gimmick for me to call a game bad. Yes, I would much prefer playing games like Melee and Ultimate, especially Ultimate, but that doesn't mean this game doesn't have a soft spot in my heart. So with that being said, thank you Brawl for getting me into video games. And I'm curious, what were some games that you grew up with? And would you like to see another video like this? Be sure to like and comment down below. This has been Cackling Pumpkins. Your connection will be strange.